G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds everyone well. Today I just wanted to go through some images that I photographed in Scotland, over in the UK, a little bit over a year ago. And the reason I wanted to talk about these images and go through my editing process this morning was to just show how a simple opportunity like this one can result in some really pleasing images and the opportunity to kind of create a bit of work showcasing the area. In this case, it was a rural area just outside of Perth in Scotland, and we were doing a bit of a road trip and left fairly early in the morning. It was a winter's morning, so pretty chilly, but it also meant that the light when the sun first came up was absolutely stunning, and certainly this rural area in Scotland provided some great opportunities. All of these images were shot within about 5 or 10 minutes of each other, and one of the wonderful things, given that it was a family road trip, was that I literally just had to pull over on the side of the road. Everyone got out to stretch their legs, and I was able to snap a few images off, which is always good. So it didn't require extensive walking or hiking in the mountains to get anywhere, which is what I'm normally doing. But it certainly allowed for some lovely images of this area. When I was shooting these images, I didn't really have the intention of creating, some artwork or stock images or anything in particular. It was just an area that caught my eye, and what I really wanted to do was just, capture the essence of that place. Some of these images might be enjoyed by people as prints on their wall, as a piece of artwork, but largely they were just to document the area. They could also end up as stock images as well. Certainly they demonstrate a rural area in the UK quite well, particularly on a cold winter's morning or frosty morning. No snow around at the time, but still lovely landscapes all the same. So for today's video, I really just wanted to go through the editing process for the selection of images that I have. So in this case, there's 5 images, and really they just, as I mentioned, showcase the area that we were travelling through at the time, which was a rural part of Scotland. Perth is, from memory, I think it's about an hour north of Edinburgh, all freeway driving, and then of course from Perth we kind of went on the lesser roads, so the more rural sort of local roads, and we were very fortunate to see some beautiful sights. The reason I chose these images, certainly for this first one, a lovely little entrance, dirt road onto some farmland, frozen puddles there, and some frost on the fence and the ground. Beautiful sunlight coming up over the horizon there. The next one, some wind turbines, a wind farm on a distant ridge with that beautiful morning glow of sunlight coming over. Another rural sort of scene. This is obviously farmland, again with a beautiful sky and some wispy clouds with some warm sunshine coming over the ridge there. This one was photographed on a slightly longer lens, but just a close-up, I guess, to compress the perspective with the trees and farm areas and the mountain ridges in the distance. And this last one I kind of chose. I really enjoyed this image because of the leading lines, certainly with the trees there, with a sort of subtle leading line into the sun in the distance there coming up over the ridge, but also the leading lines in the ground as well, and some really nice tones and textures in there to boot. So this will just be a very quick video showing my workflow to edit these 5 images. As you can see them now, they are unedited. There's no changes made to these images. These were all shot on a Fuji X-T2 with the 18-135 lens. It's not the sharpest lens, but for this trip, it was a family trip, and I certainly wasn't there for the main focus of photography, but I wanted a camera with me that would allow some quality images, and the Fuji definitely ticked that box. It was nice and light, easy to carry around, and it was just a joy to use, which I really enjoy using the Fuji cameras. For me, it really doesn't matter what camera you've got. You could have achieved these photographs with really any camera, whether it's a full frame, a micro four thirds, or a APS-C type camera, regardless of brand. The important thing is that I take cameras with me that are suitable for what I'm doing. So if I go there specifically to take photos, or if I'm contracted to photograph, then I'll have my full professional kit. For this particular scenario, I was traveling with my family and I just wanted something simple and easy to carry and use. Hence why I went with the Fuji. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what camera you're using. The most important thing is that you're out there shooting. And really, for these images, anybody could achieve these images. You guys could absolutely capture any of these images quite easily. And hopefully the editing process will help you understand a little bit more about my workflow. So as you can see, all shot fairly around the same time, fairly early in the morning. Actually, it wasn't fairly early in the morning because sunrise in Scotland in winter is actually quite late in the morning compared to where I live. But what I'm going to do to start with is just make some general changes to all of the images, and then I'll go through each one and make further refinements. Now, I would probably normally spend a lot more time on editing these particular images, but I'll just show you a bit of a quick approach today, and certainly show you what can be achieved fairly quickly. So what I've done is I've just selected all of those images. You can either click Shift and select, or Control or Command A to select all of those images. And what I'm going to do is just place some general adjustments to begin with, and then we'll go through each image and refine them a bit further. So the first one, I'm just going to place a bit of contrast on those images. I tend to photograph with a fairly flat profile, and obviously shooting everything in RAW, which for Fuji is the .raf file for this particular camera. So it gives me lots of flexibility in post. So just a little bit of extra contrast there because the files are quite flat. I'm just going to reduce the highlights as well, because obviously shooting into the sun you can lose a little bit of detail there. And I'm just going to slightly increase the shadows. And of course, with the Fuji files, I find them to be a little bit flat, certainly with the profile that I use from a color intensity perspective. So I'm just going to increase that vibrance and saturation just a little bit, just to bring a little bit more of that color intensity back, just so that I'm happy with how they look. And I might just back that up a little bit, but that looks pretty good so far. If we just do a very quick comparison between the two, from our starting point on the left hand side to our current point on the right hand side, you can see that that's certainly helped to bring the images up to a very nice position thus far. Next, I'm going to move along to sharpening. I generally find that the Fuji files don't require a great deal of sharpening, but I will apply just a little bit there. And of course, holding down my Control or Command key and clicking on, my Alt key, my mistake, and just applying a little bit of masking there is going to allow me to see exactly where that sharpening is being applied. So holding down your Alt key and masking key, or sliding your masking slider, the white areas are the areas that the sharpening is being applied to. If I slide that all the way to the left, you can see sharpening is being applied to all of it. But for example, with the sky, I don't want to apply sharpening to the sky, because that's just going to increase the apparent noise or grain in the file. So I can mask out to only the sharp edges. And I can just slide that along till I find a happy point. Moving along, I have the chromatic aberration correction set to on within camera, so that's already been applied. But that's my basic starting point for these images. The only other adjustment that I'm going to make is a slight tint adjustment, just up a little bit into a little bit more magenta and a little bit more color temperature and warmth as well. And that's just going to help to warm up those images. So let's just have a look at all of those images. You can see they look much better straight away. There's a few further adjustments that I am going to make, but we're at a good starting point. So starting with this one, I'm probably going to back off the highlight recovery a little bit, because I find when you've shot into the sun and you've blown out the sun, which is quite normal, and if you over recover, I'm going to take that to its maximum, you can see it doesn't look great. It doesn't seem to work too well, and that's fine. If I was in this scene looking into the sun, then I probably wouldn't see detail there either. So I'm just going to back off that highlight recovery and just have that, maybe drop the exposure just a touch, and that highlight recovery is sitting nice now, and it looks a little bit more natural. Now, as opposed to an effect of dropping the exposure, you can see the shadow areas are a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do is just come up to my adjustment brush. The shortcut is K. Click on that one, and I just want to slightly increase the exposure. I'm going to drop the contrast back to 0, the shadows back to 0. The only thing that I'm going to be doing is slightly increasing the exposure, and you can see the current brush size that I have there. You can adjust that if you like down the bottom here, either bigger or smaller. I'm just going to very subtly paint in that shadow area on the driveway there, just to bring a little bit of detail out, and you can see that that's done that beautifully. Just to bring out that extra detail in the shadow areas there, because I don't want it to be too dark, particularly if I'm printing. You'll find that the shadow areas will go just that little bit darker, and you may lose detail. Overall, a very subtle approach and adjustment there, but one that certainly helped. With this particular image, there's really not a lot that I want to change with this image. I might do a little bit of an increase in exposure. I don't want to go too far, because it'll tend to affect the intensity and look of that color. But overall, I think it works really well. The image is nice and sharp, or sharp enough relative to the lens that I was using, which probably isn't the sharpest lens in the toolkit, but certainly suitable for what I was photographing today. In fact, just on that, I've actually printed images off this very camera and lens combination, quite large, and they've reproduced really well. So don't be too concerned. I think the biggest I've printed is a 20 by 30 inch. So you'd be quite satisfied, assuming that you've captured it well in the beginning, that this will certainly give you some great results if you're printing some images as well. Moving on to the next one. Lovely image. I'm just going to, again, shooting directly into the sun, just back off that highlight recovery a little bit, just drop the exposure just a little bit, and then I'm going to just increase those shadow areas just that little bit. There's a natural fall off of light that you would expect for such an image. When you're shooting directly into a light source, it becomes darker very quickly. But that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that one. What I'm going to do is go up to HSL adjustments, which is hue, saturation, and luminance. Luminance being brightness, and I'm just going to drop those blues just a little bit in the sky there, and that looks great. Might go back and just increase the color temperature to be a little bit warmer. Yep, that looks good. I'm pretty happy with that. And I might just further adjustments there, but I'm pretty happy with that. It's a pretty simple image. Again, shooting directly into the sun, it's always a little bit challenging, but overall that's given me a nice effect, and I think quite a simple image, but quite pleasing to the eye. Moving on to the next one. This is just not quite shooting into the sun, but slightly longer focal length. In fact, it's at 135mm. You can see up there on the top right hand side. So the longest focal length that this lens will do. I'm just going to increase exposure just a little bit and a tiny bit more contrast. And I'm just going to reduce the highlights just a little bit there as well. And I might just paint in a tiny bit of exposure, a little bit of brightening, just in this bottom section where it's getting a little bit dark. But overall, again, very simple and minor adjustments. And it gives you quite a pleasing result. I'm actually going to go back and just reduce that color temperature down to 5650 Kelvin. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it where that's at. As you can see with my style of editing, I really edit in a very responsive manner. So I don't look at an image and think, yep, this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is the approach I'm going to take. And this is the process I'm going to use. It really is a responsive process to the particular image, so I'll make changes specifically to an individual image. I always edit images individually. Obviously, I started off just applying general adjustments, but yeah, generally I apply individual adjustments to each image before I release them, and for whatever purpose it may be. and that generally allows me to refine the image specific to what the image needs. I always shoot manually, and these images are exactly why, because my consistency of exposure and method of shooting with images means that, as you can see, I'm making very few refinements or changes in post. It really is just bringing the image back to what I experienced on the day, and that's largely because the files that I'm capturing are quite flat, being a raw file and using the color profile that I am. Alright, on to the last image. Now I'm going to make some adjustments to this image. It's a little bit flat looking. I'm just going to increase that color temperature just a little bit. I'm going to increase that, just adjust that highlight recovery just a little bit, and I'm just going to drop the exposure just a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and with those darker areas just increase the exposure just a tad of those areas to just to bring the brightness up a little bit, just so I can get a little bit more detail there. But overall, again, very little adjustment. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's have a look at the color temperature again. I just want to, I probably don't want to go too much further, but what I am going to do is I'm going to reduce my exposure to 0, and I'm just going to paint in a little bit of warmth with my color temperature, which you can do. That's the beauty of this adjustment brush, is that you can paint in all of these different types of edits or changes to your image file specific to areas. So you can change the saturation for a specific area, change the blacks, whites, shadows and highlights, the contrast, the exposure, the tint and temperature. There's a whole bunch of options. Remembering that you also have control over the size and characteristics of the brush that you're using. So remember that as well. If you want a smaller brush with a harsher edge, you can adjust to suit. And of course, if you want a larger brush with a softer edge, you can do that as well. So pretty happy with that. Let's just go back through those images. Again, I've just wanted to make very simple, slight adjustments. Now that I come back to images, and often what I'll do through my edit process is I'll revisit images, because there may be further changes that I want to make. For example, with this one, I think I just want to darken it a little bit. Still not too much that I'm losing detail in that darker area of the road leading into this farm, but just enough to bring back the intensity of that color. It was just looking a little bit bright there. Looking at the second one, yep, really happy with that one. Third one, yep, again, very simple. You may want to paint in a little bit of color just to bring a little bit of tone to that sun coming up there in Photoshop, which I'll show in a different video. But certainly, as it stands at the moment with this image, I'm quite happy with it. Again, beautiful mood, beautiful light, coming up over the horizon there, and the ridge and the mountains in the distance, and beautiful tones and textures of this rural area in Scotland. Last but not least, some great leading lines, and again, beautiful light and warmth starting the day in this scene. So thank you again for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed this video. The main reason I wanted to produce this video for you was to just show my workflow on a series of images that had been shot in Scotland 5 or 10 minutes apart from each other, and really to show that if shot well and captured well in camera, there's very minimal changes that you need to achieve the outcome that you're after. And certainly there's different ways of achieving outcomes with photos, and it's important to remember that with all of the options available to us, you can definitely achieve different results using different methods. These are the methods that I've used, so making adjustments through Adobe Camera Raw, and I'm pretty happy with the results, which of course is the main thing. But of course, keep in mind, you can do things differently. That's the beauty of creativity. Remember, you can do this yourself. Always have a camera with you, and if there's an opportunity to capture some images, then absolutely go for it. Thanks again for stopping by, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care.